to, it's funny as a pastor, I watch Facebook a lot through my wife, and when we were doing the series about Fear Factor, and there's some series that people get on social media and they're like, oh man, I was so touched, and man, this really, so we started Gods of War last week, and we talked about some very intense situations. We talked about some very intense culture things that are going on, everything from abortion to sexual immorality to, it's the gods that we worship, and the God is spelled with a little g on purpose because it's not our God, it's the gods that we worship. And I watched Facebook last week, and you know what I heard on Facebook? Crickets. Cricket. But I got a lot of you that responded to me, hey, I appreciate you touching the tough topics, to which I go, part of the reason we're losing the battle is we don't talk about the tough things. The church has gone silent on a lot of these issues out of fear of retribution, out of fear of being made fun of, in some parts of the world out of fear of persecution. And I believe if we continue to not discuss, if we continue not to have open, honest conversations about these things, that we will continue to lose ground in the battle that is going on for the hearts and the souls of every man, woman, and child throughout our country. And this doesn't just affect you. This will affect your kids. This will affect your grandkids. If we don't start taking back ground that the enemy has taken from us, it's going to get nasty in America. This week, I have titled the sermon, The Objective. You see, I was in the military for a while, and there's a couple of things that when you go to battle, you have to get right. One, we talked about last week, we talked about identifying who the enemy is, identifying what we're battling against. This week we're going to talk about an objective. If you go into a battle and you have no objective, more often than not you just get lost, and you can't actually accomplish what you're setting out to do if you don't have anything to accomplish. So this week we're going to talk about the objective in the battle of the gods at war. So I'll start with a joke, because last week I think I was a little too intense, so this week I'll start with a joke. And I'm not really good at them, so laugh. Even if you don't think it's funny, it'll make me feel better, and it's all about me today, okay? So here's the deal. So there was this little boy named Alex, and Alex was in a big church, and he was standing in the foyer one Sunday morning, and he was staring. So the lobby of the church had a wall that honored all of the veterans, and it had pictures with a gold star underneath it with their name, and it was for all of those who had died on the field of battle. And this young 6-year-old boy, Alex, was standing there, and he's looking at him. And he had been standing there for about 10 minutes, and the pastor had seen him. And so the pastor walks over to Alex, and he said, son, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm trying to figure out, what is this wall? Who are these people? He said, I'm a little bit confused. And the pastor said, well, son, he said, those are people, men and women who have died in service. And so little Alex kept staring at it. And he's looking, and a tear starts rolling down his eye, and the pastor thinks he's really touched. And he said, Alex, what's wrong? And he looks at him with alligator tears in his eyes, and he says, which service, the 9:30 or the 10 o'clock? I think there's times when if we don't know who we're fighting, if we don't know the objective, it's hard to win the war. Last week we looked at the different gods that are actually brought up in the Bible. There was Molech, and there was Mammon, and there was Asherah, and there was Baal. And I think there is this belief. See, there is a heaven, there is a hell, there are angels, and there are demons. And I think there's this belief that these gods were just these golden cows or these stone creations that they built that were really just kind of fake pieces of furniture or material. But the truth of it is I believe wholeheartedly, 100%, that these gods were actually demonic forces. And the reason I know that is the Bible talks about these. I had an opportunity when I was in college to be the editor of a little college newspaper, and I know some of y'all have gotten emails from me, and you're like, how in the world were you an editor, because your grammar is awful. I had somebody check that for me, and we had spell check. But I had an opportunity during October to do an article on the occult and what Halloween and all of that. And I know some of y'all in the deep south, you're like, oh, here comes the message. I'm not even going to touch on it today. But one of the things that I did discover as I was doing these things is I discovered different names of the occult, different demons, different people that they conjure up and they call and they try to get a hold of. And I actually had an inroad into a Wiccan kind of deal. And I asked her, I said, could you send me a list of those people? Because about this time of year, they get together in Georgia and they have this big old huge, kind of like Burning Man in Vegas, except it's this. And so they gave me a list. And the weird thing about that list is that list, all of the, what I consider demonic forces were the same name as the gods that the Bible talks about that have been worshiped, not just in our culture, that have been worshiped for thousands and thousands of years, all the way back to the beginning of time. I was actually given this list and the names on it and the way that they were worshiping these people just told me right then and there that the Bible knew that we would be fighting this 2,000, 3,000 years later. And it talks about it all throughout. But this is the side of the world that we go, ooh, that's the kooky stuff I don't really want to talk about. And it makes us super, super uncomfortable. But the Bible gives it to us. It says we're not fighting against flesh and blood. We're not fighting against flesh and blood. We're fighting against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in this dark world, and against evil spirits of the heavenly places. It says it specifically in the Bible. I believe the Bible is inerrant front to back. So when it says we're not fighting a war flesh and blood, we're fighting evil spirits, we're fighting a war in the heavenlies, I believe that. I believe that in the natural, and I believe that in the supernatural. But if you're going to go to war, you have to have a battle plan. You have to have a battle plan. You have to identify who they are. And that's what makes it tense. Because if I asked you, how many of you have a golden cow in your backyard? Nobody would raise your hand. Unless you're really weird. But the truth is, we worship so many gods. And there's so many gods. And they're sneaky. They're sneaky. They could creep into our culture, which I believe they have. They've creeped into our campuses. They've creeped into our workplaces. They've creeped into our households. And so that's why when the Bible talks about battling these, it says it doesn't just affect you, it affects generations to come. So this week we're talking about the God of me. Not the God of me, but the God of me. Does that make any sense? We're not talking about me, we're talking about you. So it would really be the God of you, not the God of me. And I think that when we look at the God of me, most of us would say, well, I don't worship myself. But then when we actually start to look at the different things that we do, the different things that we say, the different ways that we act, we start to realize that maybe once we peel off the layers, this God's more prevalent in our lives than we begin to believe. We're hanging out in this verse. It's Exodus 20. You may have heard of it. It's called the Ten Commandments. If you didn't grow up in church, that's all right. Go to Genesis, go one book over. This is where Moses went up to the mountaintop and God gave him the 10 Commandments. And it says, I am the Lord your God who rescued you from the land of Egypt, the place of slavery. And then he says this, first commandment, rule number one, most important thing. The number one thing is always the most important. The number one thing is always the best, right? So he says, I am the Lord your God. You must have no other gods before me. That's the whole premise of this entire message series. No other gods. And then it says you must not make for yourself an idol. We talked a lot about that last week. You must not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God who will not tolerate your affection for any other gods. That's a strong statement from God. You know, we hear you must not have any other gods before me. We've heard you may not make an idol for yourself. But as you continue reading into that passage, it's not just a list of 10 things. It goes in and says, I'm a jealous God who will not tolerate. Now, I don't know about y'all, but when my parents told me that they weren't going to tolerate something, you know what it meant? They weren't going to tolerate something. And it meant there's probably a consequence on the backside of that issue that I decided to test them in. So God talks about it. He says, I lay the sins of the parents upon their children. If that doesn't scare you as a parent, I don't know what will. Maybe you're a lot holier than I am, but I know what I did, and I know what I struggle with, and I know the sin that so easily entangles, and that scares me as a parent. It says, I lay the sin of the parents upon their children. The entire family is affected, even children in the third and the fourth generations of those who reject me. Think about that. This is what I go back to say. This is scriptural. It's not me just saying, hey, if you worship other gods, it's going to just affect you. This is the Bible. This is God saying, hear me. I am a jealous God. I will not let you worship any others. If you do, it's not just going to affect you. It's going to affect generations, your legacy. Generations, kids, grandkids, great-grandkids. And so it's a big deal. That's why we're tackling this. And see, here's the thing. I think a lot of times when it comes to the God of me, most of us don't believe that we focus on ourselves. Most of us don't believe. If I asked, especially in church on a Sunday morning, we would say, well, God is my focus. God is number one in my life. I don't worship me. But let me ask you, if it might look something like this. Look, we come to church, right? Check. So that means I don't worship God. Got it. I understand that. I'm in a small group. I did what you said. I joined a small group. Check. So that means I don't worship me. Or I serve. I serve in the community. So obviously I don't worship me. I can sing some songs. I know some scriptures, so I don't worship me, right? Well, let me ask you this question. What about outside of the God world? What about outside of God's house? What does it look like when you're at your job? What does it look like when you're at your school, on your campus, at your PTA meeting? What does it look like when you're on the lake fishing or in the tree stand hunting with your buddies? What does it look like after work when you all go out and kind of relax and let loose? Do you still worship God and put Him first, or do you start to put your own desires, your own needs, your own feelings? Is it self-minded or is it God-minded? Is all of your decisions based on, will this glorify God? Is this following God, or is it, I want it and I want it now? We live in a culture that says, I want it and I just don't want it. I want it right this minute. Because see, the enemy in this world, with this God, see, the world offers, culture offers so many, and they're great at it. I was just having a conversation earlier about if sin wasn't fun, nobody would do it. But the world puts these big bright lights, and they put these big blinking lights. It says, hey, I will fulfill you. This will fulfill you. This will satisfy you. If you make enough, if you buy this and go into it, you'll at least be fulfilled and you'll at least be satisfied. But this God promises a lot, but it leaves us feeling empty and unfulfilled. Today, the God of me is actually called pride. It's called pride, and we see pride listed in the 7 deadly sins, which the 7 deadly sins aren't actually biblical. The sins are listed, but it's not listed as the... So if you go and you jump on Bible Gateway or whatever app you're using and you type out 7 deadly sins, it's not going to give you a list somewhere in the Bible. But where the 7 deadly sins came from is in the 6th century. A pope by the name of Gregory came out with this list, and in this list, he categorized 7 sins that were kind of the foundation of all other sins. Now, I've got some major theological differences with the Catholic religion, but on this one I really started digging into it, and he's pretty on target with these sins. These sins lead to so many more sins, and I think pride, when you say pride, it's sneaky. You could see pride from a mile away in somebody else, right? But when you look in the mirror, you would say, I'm not prideful. I don't suffer from pride. Well, the Bible says that pride is actually the root of so many sins that once you start peeling back the sins, the root cause of it is pride. And there's an old saying. Anybody ever heard that saying, pride goes before the fall? Pride goes before the fall, and pride is actually talked about in the Bible just about as much as anything else because God knew that it would be so destructive. I would argue that pride is actually the root of all sin. And here's why I would say that, because it is the first sin. It is the sin that if you check out Isaiah 14, so up in the heavenlies, there's the angels and there's God and they're worshiping God and they've got this thing going that's wonderful and it's beautiful. And then there was one angel that decided he wanted to be above all things. You find it in Isaiah 14, 12 through 15. It says, how you are fallen from heaven, O shining stars, talking about Lucifer, son of the morning. You have been thrown down to earth. You who destroyed the nations of the world, for you said to yourself, here's the pride statements. You said to yourself, I will ascend to heaven and set my throne above God's stars. I'm going to place myself over God. I will preside on the mountains of the gods far away in the north. I will climb to the highest heavens and be like the Most High. Instead, you will be brought down to the place of the dead, down to its lowest depths. We see pride. You know what pride seems to begin with a lot? I will ascend up in the heavens. I will ascend above God. I will be over the armies of the north. You see, I. Pride begins with I. But then we see the consequences of it. It says you will not only not ascend, but you're actually going to be thrown down to the lowest depths. And see, here's the deal. When he went in rebellion against God, he then came to earth. First sin came to earth, caused a sin. So I would definitely argue that pride is actually the root of all sin, which is why it's talked about so much in the Bible, because it has destroyed so much. Think about it. We had the perfect environment. We had a creation that needed nothing. Adam and Eve had a garden that was self-sustaining. Life was perfect, as it should be, which is what I picture heaven. Everything you needed, love, honor, worshiping God. God was walking and talking with them in the garden, close, intimate relationship with God, all destroyed because of sin. The sin of pride. And then, to even entice Eve into the first sin, what did he do? Well, God doesn't want you. You need to be more like God. If you'll eat this, your eyes will be open and you'll be like, again, pride. I want to set myself up to be above God. I want to set myself up to be as knowledgeable as God. Pride over and over and over. And in our world, we would sit here and say, well, it's not the same, right? Until you go, well, I know God says this, but I believe really this. You've placed yourself above God's word. Well, I know, look, Pastor, that Bible's old. And look, I got a better way to do relationships. I got a better way. You know, we're going to live together for a little while because it's better, right? Kick the tires. I want to see if we get along. Where does that usually end up? In pain, in destruction of relationships. Oh, you know what? I got a better idea. I'm going to try sex before marriage. Where does that end up, usually? Pain, baggage, destruction, shame. You see, pride is the root of all sin. It was the root of the original sin. But as I said, we see it easy. I mean, I can see pride in y'all like you can't imagine. See it in every one of you. Just kidding. Some of y'all are really offended right now. But when I look in the mirror, I don't see it, right? Because I don't have pride. And in churches, I hear this statement, church, and I'm not bashing church. I believe church is the hope of the world. But here's the deal. In church, we see this play out like this. I can't believe they would walk in looking like that. I can't believe that they were at the bar last night. Can you believe they'd walk into God's house smelling like that? I bet they just stopped drinking. You know what? Can you believe? You know what I heard about her last Friday? Can you believe she walked into my Sunday school class? Or you ask a theological question in a small group, and somebody can't quote John 3:16, and it's like, they obviously aren't Christ followers. They don't know John 3:16, because if you don't know John 3:16, you obviously can't be a Christian. You know what? I know the whole book of John. I memorized it front to back. We laugh, but it's true. We look down on people that aren't as spiritual. Pride, we gossip about people that aren't as spiritual. Gossip is a fruit of pride. And then I hear these phrases about, oh, man, somebody needs to approach them. They're living in sin. You know, I don't do that. I would never, be careful with that one. I would never. I had a pastor I knew who was like, I would never drink alcohol. I don't even let NyQuil touch my lips. 6 months later, he had a moral failure. You see, pride also lets down our guard. I'll never do that. I would never. Can you believe what they did? You let down your guard because you think you never, and then the enemy walks in and smacks you square in the face. And then you look up, and you know what? Pride comes before the fall. Pride, the root of all of it. Proverbs 16:18 says, pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. Proverbs 11:2, when pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom. Proverbs 29:23 says, pride brings a person low, but the lowly in spirit gain honor. 1 John 2:16 says, for everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, comes not from the Father, but from the world. God hates pride, and it doesn't come from him. It comes from the world. It says the enemy is out, roaring, stalking like a lion, looking to devour our spiritual lives, our reputations, our testimony, our families. And the way that he does it the most is through pride. We're going to take a look at a story. Jesus talks about pride. It's found in Luke chapter 18. And it says this. It says that Jesus told this story to some who had great confidence in their own righteousness, and they looked down on everyone else. That's spiritual pride right there. See that? I've got great confidence in my own, and I look. See, having confidence in yourself isn't pride. Having confidence in yourself and in your abilities and in your calling isn't pride. Having confidence in yourself and looking down on somebody else because of it is pride. So he goes on to say, 2 men went to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee. Those guys were super religious. The other was a despised tax collector, otherwise known as a despised sinner. I've tried to correlate this one into something like despised tax collectors. We see it all throughout the New Testament. These were the guys that took the taxes for the government that was enslaving their people, and they didn't just take taxes for the government, they took extra. So they took taxes for the occupying forces, and then they robbed their own people. They were despised, and I was trying to think of, it'd be kind of like a drug dealer in your own neighborhood, right? Who's taking down your neighborhood. It would be kind of like I don't know, maybe somebody that still works for the IRS. I don't know. Maybe nothing's changed. So, despised tax collector, the Pharisee stood by himself, and he prayed this prayer. I thank you, God, that I'm not like these other people. Cheaters, sinners, adulterers. Well, let's start with that prayer. Thanks, God, that I'm not a sinner. Think about that for a second. For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. But this cat apparently doesn't sin. I'm not like the other people. I'm not a cheater. I'm not a sinner. I'm not an adulterer. I'm certainly not like the tax collector. I fast twice a week, and I give 1/10 of my income. You see, I'm going to stop right there. We'll jump into the rest of it in a second. But I want to stop right there, and I want to take a look real quick at 3 things that pride promises us and never delivers. The first one is self-sufficiency. Self-sufficiently. This is that thing that you have inside yourself. This is the one that if there is one that I deal with the most, it's probably this one. That I can do it on my own. I don't need your help. As a matter of fact, I don't really want your help, because if you try to help me, you're not going to really do it right, and I could do it faster anyway. Right? Anybody else deal with that? No? We're in church. I forgot. But it's self-sufficiency. It's saying, I can do it myself. I can handle it. You go through a trial. You go through a sickness. You go through something. And this is why I know that I do this. When I got cancer, dude, I closed ranks. Like, I talked to my parents, and I talked to my wife, and I had about 2 other people. I didn't want anybody to know, because I could do it. I could make it myself. And then the crazy thing that happened was when I lowered my pride down and I allowed other people in, you know what? It alleviated so much of the pressure. But pride keeps us. Pride at work is saying, I'm not going to hand this off to anybody. What I'd rather do is work 90 hours a week, because I'm the only one in the world that can obviously do it, right? Because if I go out and I get hit by a truck, the company's obviously going to fail, because I'm the only one that can do it. Because the people who work under me, they can't do it as good as I can. It's pride. It's one of the things pride promises. The other one is self-importance. This is the Pharisee. Look at me, God, I am a Pharisee. I know I could quote all of the 613 laws. They didn't just know the 10 laws. They knew all 613 of them front to backwards. They knew all of the scriptures. They knew all of the laws. They knew all of the canon. I mean, they knew all of it, right? And they walked in and they dressed a certain way and they looked a certain way. And so people, when they saw them coming, they were like, ooh, here comes the Pharisees. Like we look at Pharisees now in church and we kind of dog them. But back then, Pharisees were the elite of the elite in the religious world. They were actually probably had more power than anybody outside of the Roman government. They were the elite of the elite. This was also Satan's problem. Look at me. I want to be the highest. I want to be above God. We see it throughout stories Jesus told. It's the person it was the Pharisee, again, who walked into church and wrote a check or whatever they did back then and was like, look at how much I give. And then he looked over at the little old lady who dropped 2 pennies in the offering thing and he said, look, she'll have more. And the Bible talks about the least will become the greatest. And in the parable of Abraham's bosom, we see the guy, the leper that was a beggar throughout the world, and we see the rich man and the beggars in the arms of Abraham. And the rich man is crying out for mercy. Those who have pride will have a fall. The third thing it does is it's self-exaltation. Self-exaltation. Look at what I did. Did you not see what I did? We even do this in like ministry things. It's like, did you see how I fed those poor? Did you see how I worked in that soup kitchen? Man, look at me. Did you see how holy I am? Do you see how spiritual I am? I'm serving. And this one, I'm not going to keep bashing social media. Nah, that's a lie. I'll keep bashing social media. But this is the one that we're seeing played out more and more. And I'm not saying don't post pictures of your kids. I'm not. I'm not saying don't post pictures of you drinking coffee in the morning. Just don't post them of your toes. But here's the deal. Is we do it. It's look at me. We're in a look at me mentality. The Instagram, the Facebooks, the Twitter. Look at what I said. And oftentimes we pride ourselves based on how many friends that aren't really friends, but they like our stuff. We pride on ourselves. And in my world, I know pastors struggle with this. You put out a quote and you want to see how many people forward it, how many people liked it, how many people follow you, how many people do that. You do it too. We live in that social media world. If you're in social media, honestly, you may say that you don't, but really you want to know if anybody likes it. And if they don't like it, you're like, I wonder why nobody likes it. I wonder why nobody likes it. And it can be a form of pride. And we can put pictures on, not out of like just sharing with our friends how life is going, but we can put pictures on there going, look at me. Look at how holy I am. Look at, I was singing in the choir. And my voice was like an angel. Not me. You see, some people think I'm the anti-church pastor. I'm not really the anti-church pastor. I've said it and I'll say it 100 times. Church is the hope of the world. Church done correctly is the hope of the world. But what I see often is that religion has crept in. And religion has a tendency to go from honoring God to pride in ourselves. You see, we can say we're honoring God, but what we're really saying is look at me. Look at me. I walked into church today. Rather than walking in humbly saying, God, thank you for allowing me a chance, we walk in and say, hey, church, look at, I'm here now. Y'all may continue. You may begin your songs because my voice is now a part of the deal. You may start class now because my knowledge has sat down. And if you're the teacher and you have a question, I know the entire book of Leviticus frontwards and backwards. We laugh about it, but it's true. We laugh about it, but it's true. And too many times religion creates a pride of look at me, not look at him. We see it in James too. We even look down on people by what they wear. Somebody wears a hat into church. What do we do? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I know I tell this story all the time. My wife got dogged one time because she had shoulders showing. We do it. Can you believe they would wear that to church? James 2:3. If you give special attention and a good seat to the rich person, but you say to the poor one, you can stand over there or else sit on the floor, well, doesn't this discrimination show that our judgments are guided by evil motives? When we look down on people, we judge them. Do not be judged unless you want to be judged by the same measure. Do we really want to be judged by the measure that we judge people? I don't. I judge people all the time. I walk around on the quad on Saturdays. I'm full of judgment. I'm right, too. But still, we shouldn't do it. And they shouldn't wear that church. But here's the deal. Truth is, there's obviously limits, and we want to honor God. I'm not talking about what we wear. I'm not talking about how much you give. What I'm talking about is looking down on other people. What are you doing it for? What are you doing it for? I don't care if you wear a suit. If you wear a suit and that makes you feel good and you're honoring God by wearing your Sunday best, wear a suit. If you want to wear board shorts and flip-flops and a T-shirt and you come in to honor God, wear board shorts, flip-flops, and a T-shirt. All I ask is you cover up the things nobody wants to see. But here's the deal. When we begin to look down on people, well, I served 8 times this month. They only served once. Obviously, they're not as holy as I am. We do it. We go into work and we're like, man, they don't put in as many hours as I do. Obviously, I deserve the promotion. Look at me, boss, look at me. Look at me. We compare because it's easier to lift ourselves up by putting other people down. Think about that for a second. We compare because when we make other people look bad, what does it do to us? We try to make ourselves look better. So I got a pride test for you this morning. If you don't suffer with pride, we're going to get wrap it up kind of. And I know when I say wrap it up, y'all expect, in the next 5 minutes. Probably not going to happen, but this is how we're going to end the service. It's going to be a pride test. So this will determine. So if you got a worship guide, just put a check down, right? If you got a worship guide, just put a check down. If you don't, just keep it up on your fingers, and let's see what you score. Do you have pride? So here's the first one. Do you long for a lot of attention? Are you constantly, look at me, I need people to like me, I need people to follow me, I need people to retweet me, I need people to tell me how pretty I am. I need to be the center of attention. I'm going to make myself the loudest. I'm going to make myself the most flamboyant. I'm going to make myself the life of the party. Do I need people to look at me? If that's you, put a check down. What about, do you become jealous or critical of people who succeed? Well, obviously they got the promotion because they fill in the blank. Obviously they're not that good. Like they wouldn't have even gotten that report done right if it wasn't for me. You know what? I bet that they did. You know what? I bet they cut corners. You know what? I can't believe. Or how about somebody's kid? Can't believe their kid made the ball team. My kid's so much better. Cricket, cricket, cricket. Do you always have to win? Some of y'all cheat in board games with your 6-year-olds. Y'all need Jesus. And I get it. I don't believe every kid should get a trophy. I play cards with my kids and I smack the card on the table. Ha! Whack! I laugh at them. Do you always have to win? Part of this is, do you always have to be right? I got to win. I got to win the battle. This is pride in a marriage. I'm going to argue with you until I win the argument. And I will go for the jugular and rip your throat out until you stop arguing back. We laugh, but it's true. Do I have to win the argument? Do I have to win the debate? Do I have to win? How about this? Do you have a pattern of lying? Do you have a pattern of lying? Pride, again, the foundational, pride says, you know what? I'm going to lie because I don't want to look bad. Do you have a pattern of lying? Do you have a hard time admitting that you were wrong? You know what? Yeah, well, I understand your point of view, but, How about, you know what? I messed up. I was wrong. My bad. Sorry. Move on. Do you have a lot of conflicts with other people? Humble people rarely have conflict with humble people. Let me hold the door open. No, you go. No, you go. No, you go. You just don't see it. But if you have a lot of conflict with other people, it might be because, 1, you either lied to them, 2, you have a hard time admitting you were wrong, or 3, you had to win. See? There we go. Do you cut in line at the airport, the store, or the freeway? All right, big truck drivers, how many of y'all are in here? I'm one. Yeah, raise your hand. Don't lie in church. How many of you got a big truck? How many of y'all know the lane's going to end Yeah, you know. And you fly up to where the little thing, and then you cut somebody off. Why? Because your time's more important than theirs. It's true. How many of you, you'll be like in the supermarket, and you're standing there, and there's about 8 people, and there's 2 old ladies in front and behind you, and they open up and you register, and you dart over there in front of them because your time's more important, right? But this is what you do. You stay on the cell phone because nobody will talk to you when you're on the cell phone. You'll be like, you know. You pretend they're not there. But what you're saying is my time is more important than your time. You see, pride manifests in many ways. How many of you get upset when people don't honor your achievements? Can you believe they didn't say thank you? Do you know how much time I spent doing that? Can you believe they didn't acknowledge me? Can you believe I didn't get Employee of the Month? Oh, Sally Joe over there, she shows up late every day. She got Employee of the Month. But I didn't. Don't they know what I do? Don't they know how hard I work? Don't they know? I want to thank you. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me. Do you trend more to an attitude of entitlement or thankfulness? Man, it is such an honor to be able to walk into a church like this. What's up, church? I'm here. I've arrived. Do you honestly feel like you're basically a good person and superior to others? That's pride. If you believe that you're better than others in any capacity spiritually, you suffer from pride. And here's why I know, because the Bible says, for all have sinned, fallen short of the glory of God, nobody's righteous, no, not one. All right, now add them all up. Add them all up. Here's the score. If you scored 1 to 10, you struggle with pride and you're proud. If you scored 0, you've got an issue. And you're very proud. Because see, here's the problem. When we deal with pride, I'm so full of myself that I leave no room for God. When we deal with pride, what we're saying, I'm so full of myself, I leave no room for God. Let's see what pride does not look like as I wrap it up and our worship team comes up. I'll get there. But the tax collector, you know, the despised sinner, the one that the Pharisees said, look at that guy, I'm not like him. He stood at a distance and dared not even lift his eyes to heaven, but as he prayed, instead he beat his chest in sorrow, saying, oh God, be merciful to me, for I am a sinner. I tell you, this sinner, not the Pharisee, returned home justified before God. This is Jesus. This is God talking. He said, between the two, the religious guy who said, I do no wrong, I'm not like this guy, look at me. And the tax collector, the biggest sinner, the promiscuous lady at the bar, the biggest drunk, the one that struggles, the guy who wears a ball cap to church. He beat his chest in sorrow. It's the 2 thieves on the cross. One's arrogant. Hey, if you're God, get us down. The other one, God, have mercy. And he gave it. I tell you, the sinner, not the Pharisee, returned home. I'll tell you, the guy who was humble and not the guy who had pride returned home justified before God. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exhausted. Straight out of Jesus' mouth. Here's what I know. If we don't let God intervene in our lives, we're hopeless. Without God, without the crucifixion, without the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, we are hopeless. I don't care how good you think you are. On your best day, on my best day, I'm not worthy to stand before the Father. Without Jesus Christ, we are hopeless. The labels of man, look at me, look at what I drive, look at where I live, look at my status, look at my job, look at my accomplishments, look. None of that matters. The labels of man does not compare to the label of God. And here's the label of God: child, my child, my child, my son, my daughter. That's the label we should strive for. There's going to come a day every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. You may not do it here on earth, but there's going to come a day where we kneel before God humbly. And my prayer for you and my prayer for me is on that day that he places his hand on our head and he says, well done, my good and faithful servant. That we can humble ourselves here on earth in preparation of humbling in his presence. that our world, when you talk about objectives, is the objective Him or is it you? Is it Him or is it me? Am I doing it for the glory of God or am I doing it for the glory of myself? Am I doing it to honor God or am I doing it to get honor for myself? You see, when we battle this, God, pride is a sneaky one. But the objective, the way you defeat it, is to put He over we. Every decision you make, am I doing it to glorify Him? Is this about God's glory or is this about my glory? You see, pride promises fulfillment. It promises honor. It promises status. But here's what you end up with: emptiness. Because it never delivers. But humility will give you the freedom. It'll give you the freedom to worship. It'll give you the freedom from the pressure of having to keep up with the Joneses. It'll give you the freedom from having to keep up with the people on that side or the people on that side. Because when you live for an audience of one, when your objective is Him, it changes the dynamics. This morning I want to finish with this. We're going to be at a time that you have an opportunity to talk to God at the end. You can come to the altar. You can do it where you're at. But here's what I want to challenge you. Just come to a place of humility. You see, I think prayer, you can pray. I pray all the time, eyes open, hat on, driving down the road. Some of you that pray driving down the road with your eyes closed, don't do that. But there's times when humility is me getting on my face. There's times when humility is me getting on my knees. I don't care what 300 people are looking at me, because I need time with God. I need time to say, God, I need to give you my comparisons because you created me. I need to quit worrying about what they think. I need to quit worrying about how many likes that I have. I need to quit comparing my kids to your kids. I need to quit comparing my stuff to your stuff. God, I want to give you my comparison pride. God, I want to give you my status. It's not about me, because without you, I have nothing. God, I want to give you my status this morning. God, I want to give you my sickness this morning. God, I know I want to keep it tight and I want to handle it myself, but God, I want to give it to you. I want to open myself up so people can come and pray with me and love me and walk with me through it. God, I'm going to give you my pride of my sickness. God, I'm going to give you my son and my daughter. God, this whole parenting thing, I thought I could do it. I don't care if they're in the house with you or they've moved away. God, I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to quit seeing my value through what team my kid is on or how many trophies they get or how many. God, I'm going to give them to you, because ultimately the legacy that I want to leave is somebody who follows you. God, I want to give you my addiction. God, I can't quit. I can't quit on my own. I've tried. I want to give it to you. Whatever that is, that habit, that bondage that you're in, God, I want to give it to you. God, I want to give you my anger. I want to give you my bitterness. You see, unforgiveness is pride. You're saying they don't deserve to be forgiven. But God, today I want to hand that to you, because I can't forgive them. Whatever pride you have in your life, and let me tell you, we got 300 and some odd people in here. We got 300 and some odd people who deal with pride. Whatever that pride is, I want to encourage you this morning to lay it down. Whether it's up here or whether it's in your seat, between you and God, give Him your pride. God, this morning, tough subject, because we don't like to think that we deal with pride. God, I like to think that I put you first in everything. But your word says that on my best day, I'm not worthy to even look at you. Only through the blood of Jesus Christ am I able to be in your presence. God, there's somebody in here this morning that's not following you. It's a pride issue. God, I pray that you speak to them. I pray that you get a hold of their heart. I pray that this morning is the day that they begin to lay down their pride and say, I need you. God, for those who are struggling, with pride, God, I pray this morning they give it to you. The root of all sin, God, we give you our sin because we know that you forgive it. We give you all the glory in Jesus' name.